Well, welcome to this webinar on branding and how branding can drive sales in professional services. This is one of these webinars we're doing at the start of the year to give you a bit of energy to make your 25 a real success. So delighted today to be joined by Chris and Jen from Growth Animals. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, David. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So we're going to talk about branding today and how it can be an important component of driving sales. And it's just really looking at the professional services sector, which is one you know well. You've helped businesses thrive in that environment. So before we get into our full conversation, Chris, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about Growth Animals, a little bit about your background.
Yeah, of course. So we are the Brighton-based B Corp marketing agency, and we've been going for now coming up to 5 years. And Jen and I have a background in client-side marketing. I'd spent 9 years internationally with Carlsberg. She'd spent 9 years in luxury fragrances, and then our paths met at the Goodwood Estate, where we had 5 very enjoyable years promoting things like the Festival of Speed and the Goodwood Revival. So lots of lovely, big consumer-facing brands. And we set up Growth Animals with this idea that we wanted to help the SME world to almost cut through the bullshit of marketing and get straight to the stuff that works. And our background is very much strategic marketing, brand marketing. And so we always want to make sure we're starting there first, because it's important to get that foundation right before you start dabbling in whichever channels, whichever activations you want to go down. And as I said before, our background is very much B2C client-side marketing. So when we started as Growth Animals, the original intention was to continue down that path. But we ended up working with so many brilliant SMEs within the professional services world that we found that it was both hugely enjoyable, but also the amount of value we could add was so huge, because brand is often something that's overlooked, I think, within this area. You know, it's almost perceived that's something for the B2C world. We know the big brands like Coke and Apple and all that stuff, but actually it's a real differentiator within the professional services world. It's something that can really enable you to step up beyond your competition, charge a premium, have more credibility, all of these things.
Thanks. And Jen, I mean, it's so much more than just a logo on a page or a website, isn't it? Your branding has got so much more to it that helps drive the fundamentals of a business forward. I mean, what's your perspective on what you bring to the professional services world from your background in the B2C world?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Like, people often think of branding as a logo, and it's so much more. It's every customer touch point. And if you can influence every touch point that you have with your clients, you can actually build a perception of your organization in their minds. And we've got plenty to play with. So you've got your visual identity on your website and marketing collateral, yes, but you've also got your brand messaging, your communications, you've got all of your channels to play with. But the key really is that it's consistent. And so that's what we're going to take everyone through today, is how to build that brand narrative to really, truly resonate with the types of clients you want to attract. And you do that thinking before you then think about how you're going to reach them and how you communicate with them.
Fantastic. Well, we are going to share some slides in a second, but we always, as always with this content, we love getting our questions from the audience. So if you've got a question, pop it in the Q&A. I'm looking out for it, and I'm going to bring it straight up to the guys as they walk through to share some ideas. But Chris, if you want to share your slides and get us underway with this conversation, that would be great.
No worries. Seeing that okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Great. Yeah, so as we touched upon before, what we want to do is really give you a bit of background around how you can harness the power of brands, unlock sales growth, and help you step up above your competitors. Just to give you a bit of background, I'm sure a lot of you are aware of this, but the origins of brands come from the very early days of ancient Egypt, where they would use a brand to mark their cattle, to differentiate from all the other cattle in the world, and be really clear that this is mine, this is not yours, sort of thing. Obviously, things have progressed a fair bit since then. Although, if any of you have watched the very popular show Yellowstone, you'll see that form of branding has continued and has even been used on people, unfortunately, in certain times. But nowadays, thankfully, in the corporate world at least, it's used a lot more kindly. And as Jen touched upon before, it's far more than just that logo that is stamped. It is everything from the sight, sounds, colors. It's the messaging that goes through your business and is used in a consistent manner that becomes an ownable asset. And why it's important is the money thing, right? So what does it deliver? So there was a really great study done by Millward Brown a couple of years back, which showed that brands that invest or businesses that invest in their brand see 3 times the level of sales growth over a period of the next decade than those that don't. And also they're shown to be able to charge a premium of around 18% more. So it's big stuff. And over the course of time, you can see that that suddenly becomes worth a huge amount to a business. And if we think about the B2B world, you know, there's some mega brands out there. You know, these 4 are referred to as the big 4, and that's partly because they have been able to build a brand that sits behind these Goliath businesses. Over time, they've done that through their branding, through their sponsorships, etc. And this consistent approach to building these brands, it means that people who work for those businesses can walk through the door of a sales meeting and they're already at a head start versus competitors because of what that brand means to the person that's on the other side of the table.
Because it builds trust, doesn't it, Chris? I mean,
It does,
like
exactly.
in the professional services world, trust is an important commodity, isn't it? And having the brand behind anyone with a business card in their hand or whatever it is, they're pitching to a new client. That's what we're talking about here, isn't it? The significance of it.
You're absolutely right. It's trust. Trust is the first thing. It's that thing that enables you to walk through the door with credibility. And then it's giving you a sense of scale or authority that's perhaps bigger than your actual size. And that's where, you know, I come back to this point of it can enable you to charge a premium than you otherwise would be able to do.
So today, Chris and I are going to walk you through a few ways that you can help build that strong brand for your organization. And the first thing we encourage you to do, and do scribble down as we're talking to see if you can answer some of these questions for your organization. But the first thing we're going to ask you to do or encourage you to do is look at what your clients' pain points are. What are their challenges? What are their motivations? What are their preferences? Because if you can build your brand around being the solution to these challenges, you position yourself as the go-to when they are experiencing these needs. So we'll go through a couple of examples of brands that have done this really well. And the first example is from the big brand world, so the FMCG world, and that is from Pedigree Chum, no less, the dog food brand. And we use this example because Pedigree Chum really cleverly tapped into a pain point of a certain part of their audience, a certain demographic of their audience. And that is empty nesters. So the empty nesters demographic, their children have, you know, flown the nest, they've grown up, they've moved out. And there's this void of love that, of course, they can fill through caring for a pet. So it was a clever campaign that Pedigree Chum ran around this, because not only did it help them sell products, but it also showed them that they understood their audience, showed their audience that they really cared, they were empathetic, and that they could meet them where they were at. So it built this trust and loyalty for the brand, as well as selling the dog food. So the next example I want to share with you about a brand who's cleverly tapped into the pain points of their target clients is an IT services company that actually Chris and I worked with recently. And they were getting lost. The IT services company was getting lost in a sea of samey competitors that all claimed to do the same thing for their clients. So what we did was take a step back and look at the pain points of the finance directors, the MDs of the companies that this brand wanted to attract. And we then understood that these finance directors, these MDs, they're responsible for the smooth running of the IT systems for their organization and making sure that there's no cyber attacks or that the business continuity could continue, but they often didn't know much about IT. So that was a real headache for them, and it really kept them up at night because they are not experts in IT. But that's where Tech Results step in, and that's where this brand is positioned as being a safe pair of hands, a true partnership with their clients to alleviate that worry and mean that the FDs, the MDs, the people making these decisions can get on with their day jobs, the thing that they do well. So the second part of your brand that we'd really encourage you to look at are your businesses, your organization's superpowers. And superpowers are not just strengths, they're the unique, ownable, competitive edges that your organization has. And it's why people choose you over anyone else. So think of them as unique selling points or core attributes. It's what makes your brand irreplaceable. And they're not qualities like that you're reliable, professional. They're special parts of your business that give you an unfair advantage. So they need to be specific, ownable, and really hard to replicate. And to bring this to life for you, I'm going to share an example of a brand that truly has mastered its superpowers, and that's the Apple brand. So another big world example. And Apple is not just a tech company. It really isn't. It actually is a category defining brand. And that is because of its superpowers. And I've named just a few of them here on the screen for you. So examples are their seamless integration. All of their hardware and software just works. It removes friction for its users. They have an obsession with user experience, real attention to detail, all details from the packaging to the interface, they're meticulously designed. They're focused on premium user-centric design. So it's not just beautiful, everything is really intuitive when you're using the Apple products. Their positioning it's a lifestyle brand. It's aspirational, not like Dell that is just functional. This is something, it's a tribe to be part of, not just a product. They own their hardware and software, unlike their competitors. So they control every aspect of its Apple ecosystem. They're really focused on iconic simplicity, minimalism, less is more. And that makes everything feel really effortless. And I think the number one superpower really is Apple's why, which is to challenge the status quo and empower creativity. It empowers people to think really differently. But crucially, you'll notice that none of these are cliches. They don't say that they're trustworthy or hardworking. They prove their worth through their actions and their innovations. So I'm going to be like a bit of a school teacher here and say, when you're defining your business's superpowers, please avoid these generic terms that any company can claim. So don't use anything around professional, trustworthy, passionate, reliable, hardworking, transparent. And why? Because no one wins on these aspects. Anyone can own these. Instead, define what only you can own. So I'm going to use another example now, and that's actually a client that we have the pleasure of working with and we've worked with for a number of years, and that is US Tax FS. So I've listed out just a few of their superpowers here that they have built their brand on, and they're super clear, ownable superpowers that give them as a firm a real competitive edge. So just a few of them include, years of experience. They've got this longevity and this deep expertise in US tax, over a number of years. They're fiercely independent. They're free from the big four bureaucracy, allowing agility and innovation. They have this unique boutique size, but also global reach. So they've got this personalized level of service, but with international reach across more than 30 countries across the globe.
Jen, on the boutique size point, I mean, this is an interesting one because a lot of PCD Club members are smaller specialist businesses, where they have a real personal touch with their clients. You know, the client who is a high net worth individual, it's a real selling point for a smaller, more boutique firm in that you're not going to get passed down. You're going to get a relationship with a senior person who's experienced.
Yeah.
And this is a story that I think smaller firms can really lean into, can't they? That you get direct access to the people with experience. You're not getting passed down the food chain, which in bigger brands is can be a common, is a common issue with how they deliver their service. So some of these I think people can really lean into, can't they?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the relationships are much deeper. The service is more tailored to the individual rather than just being part of a cookie cutter process. And it truly is a superpower. And I'd definitely recommend leaning into that. Yeah. So there are many other superpowers of US tax affairs, and I'm going to come back to them in a moment because we want to talk specifically about X factor. So the number one reason that your clients choose you over the competition, and makes you the go-to choice in your industry if you can really lean in on that number one reason. It's the number one reason your clients choose you. It's your standout differentiator. And as I said, if you can dial it up in your marketing, it positions you as the clear leader for the services that you provide. So let's have a look. Let's move on. Yeah, so let's have a look at a big brand example of a company who really have dialed up their number one reason that their customers choose them, so their X factor. And that is Volvo. So Volvo's X factor is safety. Whilst their competitors might be dialing up things like performance or speed or comfort in their vehicles, Volvo stand true to their X factor of safety because it taps into a universal pain point that all car drivers have, which is to keep themselves and their passengers really, really safe. And they've been so brave about owning the concept of safety that they plaster it on all of their marketing. I mean, look at this poster here where they have been quite blatant saying we design all of our cars to look like this, and it's a crumpled machine on the poster. So they've truly lent into that, and it sets them apart in their industry. So I said we were going to come back to our client, US Tax FS, because I want to draw out their true X factor. I previously listed a load of their brilliant superpowers, but their greatest differentiator isn't just their expertise or their specialism and niche. It's actually the caliber of their people. And, this is a excerpt from their website, which is, we believe there's a better way to do US tax compliance and planning. Or how's that? Well, our clients can rely on the in-depth, up-to-the-minute, specialized knowledge of our teams to confidently and expertly navigate the complex and challenging US tax system. Now, this is the crucial bit. US Tax invest in talent and professionalism in a great working environment to deliver that world-class service to their clients. So what does that mean in practice? Well, US Tax Affairs attracts specifically and nurtures the brightest minds in the US tax industry. They invest heavily in continual learning for their employees, career development and expertise. For example, they have a program called the Academies of Excellence. And another great example in practice is the firm's specifically designed working environment, so their offices, and its impact on colleagues and creating a culture that cultivates the very best work for their clients. And they have these new offices that are specifically designed around comfort and collaboration and welcoming clients into the fold. So it's talent that makes US Tax FS the best choice. So this truly is their X factor.
Jen, I mean, when you were talking to them about that, is there a tension between showcasing your talent and being concerned that that talent might be recruited by another competitor? To what extent do you build up people who are perhaps mobile in a stage of their career where if another competitor came along? So I think there's a tension between showcasing talent and being confident enough to say we create a great environment. There's no better place for them to work. What kind of conversation was going on internally about showcasing this kind of degree of talent to the market?
I think there's the confidence. It's about the confidence to say it and also walking the walk. So anyone can write on their website that they invest in talent, but US Tax FS, I know that talent is front and center with every decision that they make. And it is down to the tiny details of how their office space works, up to how are they running their continual learning programs, so that it's not just one and done. It is a journey for their employees, and they do attract amazing talent and retain them. It's fantastic to see. And another example is going back to what we were saying earlier around the boutique size of US Tax FS, is that because of this size, every level of employee gets great exposure to experience and even clients. So there's no program that you sit on where you are, you can't be in front of the clients until you've done this. No, it's from day one, you get all this brilliant exposure. So walking the walk is my answer to that question.
And I guess
on the flip side,
go on, Chris.
Sorry, on the flip side, David, to this approach is that by being this confident, they're able to attract more of these great talents as well. So yes, there's being concerned about the defensive side, but they're also able to attract more talent because they're so confident about this approach.
Yeah,
your own recruitment will thrive. And I guess, Jen, that also means practically that then you've got to have visual assets that reflect the talent and new people. So everyone's got to have a nice headshot. You've got to present people in a certain way. They're going to get speaking on, you're going to create a platform, aren't you? So it has implications for the broader plan, because you've got to then, with this talent story, tell it, haven't you?
Yeah, you're right. So the last part of brand that I'm going to touch on today, and I really encourage you to do, is to unearth what your emotional selling point might be. Now, you've heard of unique selling points. We've mentioned those already, but an emotional selling point allows you to resonate on a deeper level with your prospective and existing clients. And I'm going to take you through a couple of examples of brands that have done this really well. So a big brand example here is Disney, because of course Disney own the emotion of happiness. It really is their emotional selling point, and it comes through in every touch point you have with the Disney brand, whether you're watching a film, whether you've been to the Magic Kingdom, whether you're buying some merchandise in one of their stores. You get this real sense of joy, happiness, and nostalgia. And that means that you don't just love Disney as a child. Adults love Disney too, because you've got these memories of your childhood, and it really carries through the generations. So that's a big brand example, but I do want to share with you an example from the professional services world, which is actually a client of ours called ABG Corporate Finance. And the emotion that they own in the minds of their target clients really is confidence. And their strap line, as you can see here, is confidence in every decision. And how we arrived at confidence is that when we looked at the journey that they take their clients through, whether that's a professional at a private equity firm, or whether that's an individual selling their baby, the business that they've brought up, ultimately, it's their decision at every step of that transaction, But mergers and acquisitions, those transactions are fraught with pitfalls and things that can go wrong. And there's this fear from all of the parties involved that there's going to be value that's not realized from that deal, whether you are a private equity professional, whether you are a business owner. You're scared to make those decisions, but with ABG by your side, there is confidence in every decision you make, and everybody's goal is, the outcome is to realize the best from every deal.
Jen, we've got a question in from Christina, just asking, what are some of the key branding considerations for a business-to-business, B2B target market? So what are some of the key points for someone focused in on B2B? I mean, someone like ABG will also have a story for accountants or other introducers, aren't they? So, but what would you say is most important for those on those B2B channels for professional services?
So if I've understood the question correctly, then Chris and I, as we said at the beginning of the conversation, although we are in our background business to consumer marketeers, gone are the days where it's a business selling to a business. It's actually an individual selling to an individual. So we've blurred those lines completely between B2C marketing and B2B marketing. And that's why when we talked about emotional selling points, tapping into your clients' needs and pain points, ultimately we're selling a service here to a person, those finance directors, MDs who need support with their IT services because they don't know anything about it. You're alleviating that fear by positioning yourself as the go-to. So if I've understood your question correctly,
I think it's something like, I mean, if US tax, the messaging is not different between the intermediary market that's important to them or the consumer. That they get the same story, don't they? Whether it's an end client or whether it's someone who's going to refer a client, those points that you mentioned have the same integrity. It's not two different kind of journeys, is it really? So I think that gets to it for sure. But Christina, let us know if that's answered your question.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for it.
Great. So the next stage, really, once you've gone through those 4 steps that Jen has talked about, is to start building your brand manifesto. And this is really that banner for your company to march behind. It's that thing that excites your customers, and it should form really the basis for your messaging going forward. And how we do this is we break it down into 4 sections. So you've got the first section, which is all around tapping into that pain point, the client tension that Jen talked about. We want to build empathy and show that we understand their issues as part of this. Then we go into a couple of reasoning sections. So firstly, we want to differentiate clearly against your competitors. And in the third area, start to outline those gains of why your client should choose you over those competitors. And at the end, in the final section, we then go back to emotion. So we position to the old brain, the left brain, and those emotive instincts, and tap back into those pain points. So I've got an example for you, firstly, here from a big brand we'll all be familiar with, which is Fiat, and have broken it down for you. So the first section you can see here is that emotive starting point. So they talk about people who simply live their lives, and there's people who take charge of their lives and live it so passionately that they're in love with it. Love that shines through in every moment and everything they do, big or small. It's not just cursory appreciation, but unadulterated passion. So you can see already how they're starting to talk to a certain person who they think that way. They're going, yeah, okay, yeah, that's me. I can see that. Then they bring in their differentiating point. So it's this ability to celebrate the smallest of things with infectious excitement that arises from a certain Italian way of life. So now what they've done is they've immediately discounted 95% of the car market, because you can't do that if you're a German brand, a Japanese brand, a French brand, a US brand. It's only the Italian way of life that can do this. And so Fiat are in a position to do that as an Italian brand. They then go further to talk about how they make that come to life. So it's this attitude that's at the core of the Fiat brand, its employees, the vehicles they create, and the people who rejoice in their ownership as individuals as well as a proud collective. And then they finish with that final reasserting the emotive point. So people who love Fiat cars, not just for the simple, beautiful, iconic design, but for their attitude to live big, just like they do. And it's encapsulated by their strapline at the top of life is best when driven. And so you can use this manifesto as a basis for your communication. As I said, it can be used within your employee manuals to make new starters come in and understand what the brand is all about from day one. It's often used on business web pages, whether that's on the homepage, the About Us page, and in many other cases, it's even got little snippets taken in and used across advertising and so forth. We've got an example now from the professional services world. So a client of ours is Indigo Tax and Accountancy. And going through those 4 steps, we identified that the big frustration, the big tension for their clients, their core clients, was this idea of being frustrated with having to go through all the steps of tax and compliance when ultimately their core customers were SMEs who wanted to just get on with doing what they're great at. They also have quite a large section of their audience who are within the entertainment space, so musicians, comedians. So you can imagine that these are very creative people, and for them, doing their taxes, going through compliance is the last thing on their mind. They want to be concentrating on making music and creating gigs. So it's a real frustration for them to have to endure this element of what all business owners have to go through. And so the superpowers that Indigo were able to bring to the fore, there were many, but the ones that really stood out was this idea of being proudly independent within a market that was full of businesses being swallowed up by bigger guys and losing their independence. And because of that independence, they were able to talk about this idea of genuinely caring for their clients, having that personal touch and really high levels of integrity that filtered down from their founder and were really apparent within the organization that we went and spoke to. And so within that, they landed on this X factor of we care, because that really was the thing that stood out first and foremost. And it translated then also into this emotional selling point of feeling supported. When you're a client of Indigo, it's almost like this sigh of relief, this exhalation of all the stress and frustration, because you're within this nice environment where you're fully supported. Someone's taking that off your hands and that stress has been taken away. So
How
how
much,
that's,
Chris, do you think,
yeah.
I mean, how much do you think that, for example, in professional services, physical location and office premises and branding makes a difference? Like, I'd be amazed. I mean, I imagine Indigo or in Soho, for example. It's like there's certain locations fit with industries, or if you're in the high net worth space, you're in Mayfair. If your office is in Marble Arch or something, you're sort of having to explain why.
Yeah.
To what extent do you think like location and say office finish, like office look and environment, it all comes together in terms of your overall, how you present yourself?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because I mean, anyone can say that they are a company that hangs their hat on this idea of we care. But if you've got a really sterile environment and you're making it come to life, then it's just not credible. So you're
Mm.
right. When you're looking at trying to uncover what your superpowers are and ultimately your X factor, it's looking within the organization of what are we genuinely right now? What are our values? Does that filter from the founder down? Is that actually showcased within the physical environment we're in? And if it's not, but we feel like there's a mismatch, then let's fix that. But these things don't work if they're not credible.
Mm. Interesting.
Just a word on that is when you do all of the prompts that we've given you to do with your brand, we really encourage you to bring in all of the different stakeholders you've got within your organization, because it's really important that, as Chris said, you're all marching behind the same banner and aligned on what your brand stands for. Because once you are aligned, then you can encourage everyone to make every decision through the lens of the brand manifesto. So thinking about your example there, David, was where should our offices be?
Mm.
should our offices look? Well, if you get the brand manifesto in front of you and you're in that headset and mindset, then you make the decision in a consistent way with what you stand for and what you want to be in the minds of your potential clients.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so using Indigo as the example, when we start working with the company, we want them to really interrogate what those values are. We ask them to brainstorm together what they think those superpowers are, and we get them up on a post-it note. We get the team to vote for which ones they feel are the real winners here. And in the case of Indigo, it was quite fascinating because the values that came out were clearly linked to a lot of the core values of the owner. And we often invite them to do this brand personality test at the beginning. And that brand personality test effectively gives you an animal personality, but it has a bunch of characteristics that are synonymous with that said character. And in this instance, the founder was a panda. And the panda is known for being caring and being sort of personable, cuddly character. And it's no coincidence that we ended up landing on a panda character to be part of their logo, to give it that differentiation against all the other, let's say, more clinical tax and accountancy firms out there. So just to touch upon briefly how that also played out for their brand manifesto, you can see again, it's in these 4 sections. So we started out with a piece that really tapped into their customers' tension around this idea of them wanting to, get their focus back onto the things that they want to spend their time doing, what they do best. And then we tapped into why, at the second paragraph, why Indigo were different. They've been supporting clients for 25 years as an independent. They've avoided all those mergers that all of their competitors are doing, so that accounting with integrity is in their DNA. And then they went further to talk about how they're really supported, how there's that feeling of being in safe hands, taking time to really understand your needs, giving you that peace of mind. And then ending on that final piece, taking away all the stress, fear of HMRC, forget that confusion. We're not just your accountants, we're your partners in building that business with you hand in hand. So hence the strap line of proudly personal. And this is just an example. So I talked about how with your manifesto, you can use it in your employee handbooks, you can use it on your homepage. There are some, such as Patagonia, who are so proud of their manifestos that they emblazon it across buildings. So that's the kind of how far you can go, depending on how much you truly believe.
Do you think, Chris, like a market position, so in terms of an aspiration, you could legitimately say, oh, we want to be the number one in this kind of product category, or what kind of thing, how much should things be the status quo as to where things are at now, and how much should be sort of tilted towards we're striving to do, something unique in the sector or have their own goals? How much of the process is around that, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's great examples of companies that have put big, hairy goals out there into the public, and I think it shows ambition, it shows vision, and as long as they can back it up with the actions, then there's no reason not to go for that as well. So we've touched upon it briefly. I just wanted to explain the process that we go through and that we always recommend when it comes to building your brand and your positioning and developing it. So we start off with the unearth phase, which is effectively that interactive workshop with as many of your key stakeholders as possible. We tap into your personality types. I'll come on to the quiz in a minute and give you the link for you to try that. And we're really trying to get under the skin of your business, your customers and your brand, to find that uniting banner to march behind. Then we always recommend a forage stage. So this is where we test some of those hypotheses. We look at some of the insights you already have, but also go and crucially talk to some of your existing clients, the ones that you potentially want more of. And so we test these assumptions. Is that really how you feel about said brand? Is this really why you came and started working with them in the first place? After that, we go into the hatch phase, the fun phase, where we can start to bring the brand to life, whether that be with visual identity, messaging, our marketing strategy, etc. And then the nurture bit is where there's that ongoing partnership of making sure that that strategy comes to life through the various activities that are required to do so. And just so you're clear about what our outcomes are, so our clear areas of expertise are marketing strategy, that upfront bit to really make sure you've got the foundations in place before you even go jumping onto any channels or activities. That brand development, making brands come to life, and outsource marketing direction. So once you've got that plan in place, once you've got that strategy in place, because we've been heads of marketing, marketing managers, etc., we can fill that role as being those fractional CMOs, if you like, and pull together the teams, that combination of your in-house team and external experts to make the plan come to life for you. Now, I touched upon this brand personality quiz. So this is something that sits on our website. It's absolutely free. It takes 2 minutes to do. It is incredibly insightful. So this is the starting point of everything we do. We always use it in our workshops as a way to get under the skin of all the people in there. There's a QR code. You can tap that one to kind of get on and have a look, or you can go onto our website and find the brand quiz. Effectively, what we've done is we partnered with a chap called David Hodgson, who is an author and research in personality type. So this is based upon Carl Jung personality theory. It's the sort of thing that inspired the likes of Myers-Briggs colors tests, if any of you have done those. But the idea is it's a really quick version, but it's incredibly insightful and it's fun as well. So you end up with your animal personality, and you'll get served a number of options around what your superpowers are and things like that. So you can share it with your colleagues, share it with your family, see what your husband or wife are like compared to yourself as well. It's always quite insightful. And that's it really. So yeah, drop us a line if you want to chat through any of this. We're brand freaks. We love talking marketing strategy. So yes, thank you
Thank you so much for running through that. There is still time to put a question in. I've got my Q&A open, but I was just gonna ask both of you. You know, a lot of the professional services firms in our community are selling a very technical product, almost like your IT chap, IT firm that you were discussing. And when they're making plans for their marketing, what they're going to share, what content they're going to produce, how do you sort of strike the balance between what they should be, how they should be reassuring the audience and just saying we'll handle it, and also enlightening that audience on things they might not have thought about? Because there'll be varying degrees in that audience of appetite for actual information and learning. How would you kind of approach a firm with a technical product that wants to try and push out there, and they're uncertain as to the balance of the type of content or the messaging that they should be delivering? I think it's a challenging one, and it's hard to get right.
Yeah, I mean, it's that classic sort of brand versus tactical messaging, and there has to be a balance between the two. And I think what we've tended to see is within the professional services world, you get too much of a lean towards the tactical messaging. That's crucial, yes. People need to know exactly what you're doing, exactly what you're advising. But the thing that can add more value on top, and as I said at the beginning, differentiate you from your competitors, is having that bigger brand thinking, strategic messaging out there as well at the same time, so that they combine, they're not working against each other, they're complementing each other. This is making this feel more powerful, more credible, if that makes sense.
And I suppose it's segmenting your data as well, isn't it? So it's knowing if you've got an intermediary list that likes certain technical information, that's fine. Your client, you know, it's knowing your audience, isn't it? As always with
Exactly.
marketing, and
Exactly that.
segmenting and trying to do something that serves all of those different constituent parts, isn't it?
Yes, and I think one of the questions that came in earlier touched upon it, is that, you know, when we're building the brand messaging and we're looking at X factors and so forth, we're trying to find the uniting X factor, the uniting tension of all the various different audiences you might have. Because what we want to find is the most powerful one that covers all of them. But then when we talk tactically in terms of your messaging, then of course you need to be thinking, right, what does this specific client need in terms of the messaging from me? You know, if we're going down to a really tactical level of emailing someone a specific message, then it's got to be exactly relevant to them. But at the brand level, there needs to be this overall empowering, exciting, encompassing message.
Well, thank you so much today, Growth Animals, for joining us. Fascinating session. We really encourage people to do that QR code quiz. We'll circulate a copy of this replay and put you in touch with Chris and Jen in case you've got a branding project that you can work on together. So thank